Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Asia House. I'm Michael Lawrence. Great to see you here today. We're delighted to welcome to Asia House one of the world's leading thinkers on artificial intelligence, Dr. Kai-Fu Lee. Dr. Lee is Chairman and CEO of Sinovation Ventures, a technology investment firm which focuses on developing the next generation of Chinese high-tech companies. He's also president of Sinovation Ventures Artificial Intelligence Institute. Dr. Lee is a former vice president of Google, former president of Google China, and has held executive positions at Microsoft and Apple. I'm also pleased to welcome Matt Hancock, the UK's Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. Matt Hancock spoke at Asia House last year when Minister for Digital and was elevated to Secretary of State in the recent cabinet reshuffle, for which, congratulations. We'll be hearing from the Secretary of State in just a few minutes. Now, some of you here may have attended the Asia House conference in Hong Kong late last year on the reshaping of global trade. We assembled government ministers from the region, officials, business leaders and experts to look at the future of world trade amidst the disruptive forces of growing protectionism in the US under President Trump, China positioning itself as the champion of globalization, the rise of Asia, in particular ASEAN, as a force in world trade, and of course, Brexit. But another theme emerged, one great disruptor that's on the near horizon, and one that will reshape businesses and industries, economies and societies, is artificial intelligence. Right now, the general consensus is that the US is the leader in AI. But China aspires to take that lead. The Chinese government has made AI a top policy priority. China recently announced plans to build a $2 billion artificial intelligence research park in West Beijing as part of that ambition. The AI race and its impact on the world will perhaps become the story of this century. With more funding and greater access to data, a key component required to enable AI to learn, can China become the world leader in artificial intelligence, and if so, when? Well, very shortly we'll be hearing from Dr. Kai-Fu Lee. But first, let's look at how the UK's role in the development of IA will move ahead going forward, and the relationship in terms of IA between the UK and China. Please welcome the UK Secretary of State for Digital, Matt Hancock.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and it's a great pleasure to be here and with you, Dr. Lee. 我非常高兴能在这里. As I just said, I hope, I'm really delighted to be here. The past few years have seen a blossoming in relations between the UK and China, so much that President Xi said that we're in the midst of a golden age. And just last month, I had the pleasure of meeting Vice Premier Liu at the UK-China people-to-people dialogue here in London. And through this ongoing dialogue, we've made some great strides in building cooperation in many areas, including culture and the creative industries. And I'm hugely looking forward to attending the next meeting in China later this year. And these cultural relations between our countries are stronger than ever before. Just last month, the V&A opened a brand new design gallery in Shenzhen, the first branch of a major British museum outside the UK. And next month, the ancient wonders of the terracotta warriors will go on display at a major exhibition in Liverpool. And I start with these cultural ties because they are important. They're important in and of themselves, but they're important because they signify a flourishing relationship. And I want to see this flourishing relationship intensify in the tech sector too. And the two are linked, because cultural and creative industries provide the content for the tech revolution. Now, of course, China's rapid development and modernization under the Belt and Road Initiative provides great opportunities for our countries to work together in building the industries of the future. And it's wonderful to be here beside you, Dr. Lee, given that your name is such a byword for ingenuity and transformation in tech. And I've seen your comments this week on how China and the UK should be partners in the AI revolution. And I was delighted that you praised the UK's world-class research institutions and creative entrepreneurial culture, and said that we are home to some of the hottest AI companies in the world producing breakthroughs of global significance. Needless to say, I couldn't agree more. So I wanted to talk very briefly about our plans in this area and the opportunities of our countries to work together, because we see the UK as a world leader in AI, and I am absolutely determined that that is where our future lies. The UK's benefited from a strong starting position. We have a very well-developed digital and data infrastructure, a highly digitized public sector, and we've done a lot of work to build on this. AI is a huge priority for the government, and there's a big program of work in place. We've seen some fantastic AI-based companies grow in the UK, including the success stories of DeepMind and Blue Prism and Darktrace and many others. A major AI review led by Dame Wendy Hall and Jerome Pesenti identified the critical elements for the exciting technology to thrive and grow in the UK. And we're investing heavily in innovation through the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, providing 93 million in AI and robotics over the next few years, and developing, crucially, a regulators pioneer fund to support UK regulators to develop innovative approaches to emerging technologies. And critically, we're working to foster, to attract, and to retain the best and brightest research talent from around the world. The Alan Turing Institute is our national institute for AI research, partnering with leading universities and supporting the prestigious Turing Fellowships. And then, of course, we want to lead the world in the safe and ethical use of data. Here I pay tribute to the work of the Royal Society and the British Academy for their pioneering research. And based on their recommendation, the UK has committed to a new Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation. And this is important because it will support the innovative use of data. It's a world first, an advisory body to advise us on how we can ensure ethical and safe and innovative uses of data now and in the future. And I hope that it will lead a global debate on how we make sure we harness this technology for the good of mankind. I know that China's also been pursuing some fascinating AI projects, and I look forward to hearing more about them shortly, and doing considerable work in this area. And that you too are aiming to be the best global innovation centre for AI by 2030. There are many opportunities to work together. And as the UK increasingly looks to the world and to strike trade deals independently with new markets and strengthen our relationships the world over, this will provide new opportunities and new markets, particularly in emerging industries. And to make the most of these opportunities, we will need to reach common understanding on a range of issues. How we preserve and use intellectual property, how we maintain business-friendly regulations and innovations, how we can maximize the benefits of working together, and how we can ensure that there is a well-funded ecosystem. International norms about how to keep AI safe and fair will be crucial in the coming years, not least because of the complexity of the technology and the decision-making that it replaces. This will help develop an effective and prosperous international market for AI products and services. And of course, innovation and responsibility are not mutually exclusive. In fact, I would argue that they are deeply complementary. Consumers need to trust AI before they are going to let it into their lives and into their homes. But we in the UK cannot build this ecosystem and cannot build this trust alone, and nor can any nation. International agreements and frameworks will become more important than ever, and I hope the bonds forged at events like today will help to shape them. That is our challenge over the coming years, and through hard work and global cooperation, it can be done. Shai Shai.
Matt Hancock, thank you very much indeed. It is now my great pleasure to welcome to the stage Dr. Kai-Fu Lee.
Thank you very much. It's a distinct honor to speak at such a great venue with such an esteemed audience, especially Mr. Secretary. What I want to talk about today is first tell you that I represent venture capital. We are China's largest investor in artificial intelligence and also one of the largest creators of unicorns. We invest in many areas, but in the AI area, probably we're best known for investing in one of the world's best face recognition companies, several autonomous vehicle companies, financial AI, and so on. We see China growing very rapidly in its large Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent types of AI, but also we are leading the way in building brand new AI companies that will make AI pervasive in many traditional industries. First, let me just dispel the notion of weak AI versus strong AI. We're not here to talk about strong AI, that is AI being everything the humans can do. There is no engineering basis demonstrating that. I'm here to talk about so-called weak AI. Despite its name, weak AI is quite powerful. Weak AI is characterized as within a single domain collecting so much data that AI makes better decisions than people in terms of classification, prediction, and estimation, and also synthesis. So that weak AI can be used to synthesize very natural human speech, to recognize speech and faces, to be used in customer service, in loan approvals, as well as the well-known AlphaGo that defeated the world's champion in gaming. And one domain at a time, AI can create tremendous value and also bring some challenges, such as job displacement that we have to face. So there are many AI algorithms. The one that is best known is called deep learning. And the UK had a lot to do with the creation of this technology, which you can think of this as a super spreadsheet on steroids. You feed in the data, and then the answer with respect to the perception, prediction, classification comes out. You feed it a lot of Go games, it learns how to play. If you feed it a lot of loan behavior, people repay and not repaying loans based on their own personal characteristics, it will decide whether you should underwrite the loan or not. Feed it a lot of stocks, it can make investments. Feed it customer service logs, it can service the customer. And feed it medical diagnosis, it can come up with suggestions about specific types of cancer. It's important to realize this is not a generic engine. It has to be trained on large amounts of data, one domain at a time. But there are tens of thousands of domains, and that's why weak AI alone will totally change the future of mankind. Let me now switch to the main topic of the discussion of why China will be one of the leaders in AI. If we look at the super scientists, we will see American, British, Canadian researchers pretty much occupying the, let's say, top 100 researcher spot in the world, something to be very proud of, and China is not likely to catch US, UK, and Canada in this top researcher status for decades to come. So why then can I be so optimistic about China's future? Well, first is the rising stars. Stars that came from Microsoft Research, which I formed, and subsequently trained 5,000 Chinese AI scientists, including interns. Stars of the smartest AI researchers turning into entrepreneurs and CTOs and CEOs, and AI becoming the #1 profession of the engineering students. And the Chinese engineering schools are excellent, with a massive number of graduates with very strong mathematics and computer science, which formed the foundation for them to become a young army of AI scientists, jumping in fearlessly and trying to resolve a lot of problems. If you look at the scholarly publications, while the top 100 researchers are occupied by Americans, British, and Canadians, if you look at maybe down to the top 10,000 scientists, here's an analysis we did on the top 100 AI journals in the world and who published on it. The Chinese authorship percentage has gone up from about 23% up to 43%, even larger than China's population share in terms of these very high quality journals. So China's definitely up and coming in its talent base, and it's a massive number as well. The second aspect is that China is a great market for deploying AI, but more importantly, China has a lot of data, and data is the fuel of AI. On the left side, you see an experiment, the details of which is not important, but what you see is the 5 colors of the curve performing better and better with more data. So it seems almost like having more data is the universal engine that makes AI perform better, more so than which algorithm you choose or whether you have a great or good AI researcher behind it. And China has so much data, and that more data will create better products and generate more revenue, buy more machines, and then generate even more data. China's data numbers are so large that many of you are familiar. In terms of mobile users, China is 3 times that of US or India, and pretty much about the same as the rest of the world combined. So China alone is a monolithic data source that is as large as the rest of the world combined, because Chinese mobile users are not only large in number, but extremely active in their usage of mobile applications. But mobile user is just one metric. There are many other metrics in which Chinese numbers completely outshine the rest of the world. One of the greatest advances in the last 4 years in China is the pervasiveness of mobile payment. It's not exactly an AI element, but let me first explain how powerful this is. If you go to China, bring no cash because it's not going to be very accepted. Credit cards won't be accepted in too many places either, except your high-end restaurants and hotels. People in China use mobile payment. That is Alipay or WeChat Pay, and it is used in the following way. It is peer-to-peer, so anybody can pay anybody. It is frictionless in almost no commissions being charged, and it is micro-payment capable. You can pay someone 15 cents. So with this capability, imagine, number one, how much data Alibaba and Tencent are gathering on user spending. And further imagine how many innovations can be built on top. For example, there are 50 million shared bicycle rides in China per day. And those 50 million rides are only possible because of mobile pay. You're not going to get someone to swipe a credit card or stuff cash into a bicycle, but mobile payment will help you find the bike, pay it instantaneously, unlock the bike for use, and lock it when you're done. All of it done using wireless technologies. And while you're riding those bikes, all of your data, biometrics, your location, your health, traffic conditions of these 50 million bike rides per day are being transmitted up to the cloud, used for better predictions. And these types of data continue onto things like food delivery, bike, and cameras are being implemented in airports, shopping malls, schools, clinics, all of which capturing and digitizing the physical world and transmitting the data for better processing and understanding. Now, one could question, well, are there privacy issues? Of course there are, but it is a process where one trades off privacy in exchange for security or convenience. That is a trade-off that the Chinese people are more ready to make, and that's another enhancement on top of a gigantic amount of data. This graph shows the various Chinese companies, how fast it takes to get to 20 million orders per day. And you can see the record is set by our investment, Mobike. It's only 11 months. It went from a startup with nothing to 20 million bicycle rides per day. So huge market, huge data. Can Chinese people build products? Some people still think of Chinese companies as copycats. But I want to tell you that those days are long behind us. It is true as recently as 8 years ago when we started Sinovation Ventures, many of our investments were copycats. But China has quickly evolved beyond that. From the early days of copying from the US to inspired by US, but leapfrogging and sharing ideas and using ideas towards Chinese innovations beginning to lead the world. Shared bicycles, personalized news, live streaming, smart financial products served over the internet, and also smart mobile payment and wallets. These are applications that don't exist. I was in New York Times a few days ago, and I was asked to explain each application because people in the US had no idea what any of these applications were, and they were generating tens of millions of daily active users and becoming billion-dollar companies. So this Chinese innovation, while still largely in China, is growing rapidly, and on the right-hand side, you see starting to go abroad in terms of investments and influence outside China. So there are a lot of beliefs in Silicon Valley on how tech products should be built, and China is shattering many of those beliefs. There is a belief in the US that copycats are fundamentally frowned upon. China has demonstrated copycats are the best way to learn as you become an innovator. Silicon Valley believes a company should be focused on one technology and keep it light. Chinese companies believe you fight in a gladiatorial fight to the death, and you make your products as deep and hard, impossible to copy, and you raise as much money as possible, and you give away as much as possible in order to prevent competition, price war, and also raise your moat, make your moat so deep that the competitors cannot easily creep in. So the China competitive environment is much tougher than Silicon Valley. From the China perspective, Silicon Valley companies are cordial and mild and weak. And some Chinese companies would say Silicon Valley companies are actually also lazy in terms of not having the same work ethic. I'm not making a value statement about Silicon Valley. I have great respect of great companies there. I'm just saying there's an alternate way of building great companies. And these companies and the VCs like us who fund them are now very practiced and ready to fund the next generation of AI companies, propelling China to a leadership status. So how well will China really lead in everything? Probably not. If we think about waves and types of AI products, we can separate them into 4 categories, and I will give you my assessment on where China stands. The first wave is Internet AI. That is, the Internet companies have the greatest amount of data and therefore the easiest time to leap into AI leadership. That's an area where US clearly led, but because China's wide gap in using data, I think is catching up and probably going to lead the US. And the tangible result will be, I will predict that the Chinese companies compared to the equivalent US company will lead in market capitalization and growth. Perhaps with a single exception of Google versus Baidu, where Google is way ahead for its AI depth. In almost all other cases, I would estimate in the next 3 years, the Chinese market capitalization will be 50% higher than that of US because of the data fueling the opportunities. The second category China will not lead. It has to do with business AI, that is using business data that's stored for perhaps archiving for banks and insurance and hospitals. Chinese companies have never had a good tradition and habit of buying enterprise software, using data warehouse. Products like Oracle, SAP, Salesforce are not seriously present in China, and applying AI to a not very well cleansed and structured data will be very difficult. So US will lead in the second area for the next 2 to 3 years for sure, but China may eventually catch up. The third area I mentioned, digitize the real world, putting cameras and microphones everywhere. That's an area where China is building the world's best cameras, sensors. Everything's built in Shenzhen. It's cheaper, easier to deploy. People are less concerned about privacy, more willing to trade privacy for convenience, and also just more data will get gathered and things will be improved. Now, that's not to say American companies will go nowhere because of privacy. Just think about Amazon Echo, that is in 30 million homes and listening to us every day. So that is as much as a privacy concern as the cameras in the Chinese shopping malls and hospitals. Lastly is full automation AI, and all the other AI before are based on software or some hardware sensors, but full automation means science fiction robots that happen in industrial, commercial, and home applications, and of course in autonomous vehicles. We think China is behind in those technologies, but there are plenty of reasons for China to catch up. On the US positive side, the technologies are more advanced, particularly Google leads in autonomous vehicles, leads the world. On America's favor, there are higher paid jobs such as dishwashers, strawberry pickers. There's incentive to build a robot to replace those relatively highly paid workers. In China, the pay is still much lower and there's not the financial motivation to build those products. On the other hand, China has all these factories and a process of making these products and becoming more advanced. So that is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it will push for China's industrial AI to be advanced. On the other hand, it will create job issues. So that's likely China ahead. So all in all, I think in the last automation area, China has a good chance to co-lead, but is not currently ahead right now. And then lastly, we heard about policy, and I will just say that the Chinese policies are very strong. The Chinese leadership is what I call techno-utilitarian and very good in execution. In contrast with the Obama white paper on AI, which is very thoughtful in things like privacy, bias, and security, the Chinese white paper is more like a 5 or 10 or 13-year plan where China intends to become a world leader hub in AI innovation. And that is now being heard across the provinces and cities. We heard about the Beijing $2 billion plan. Guangzhou, Nanjing are putting together plans. And a lot of these plans actually have meat. Have teeth. It is also echoed from the top, including President Xi's announcement and speech at the 19th Congress. You will see AI discussed in very thoughtful terms. So the advisors around the president is very, very strong in how AI will get adopted. To give other examples of government execution, high-speed rail was an aspiration set out in 2010. Today, China is the world leader in the application of high-speed rail. Mass entrepreneurship began 4 years ago. Now 6,600 incubators have been built in China, and Chinese parents are much less concerned about the risk issues with entrepreneurship compared to, let's say, 8 years ago when I started Sinovation Ventures. So that execution power combined with financial incentives will help China leap ahead. So maybe let me just close and talk about one more thing is the techno-utilitarian approach, which I think we'll see fewer analysis paralysis around a lot of the unsolvable issues, such as the trolley problem. It is fair to debate it, but if the debate impedes the progress, that is to the detriment of the country in which the analysis paralysis occurs. While it is worthwhile to debate, what is incontrovertible is the fact that if you launch a product that is pretty good, better than humans, you should launch it, because in iteration and data gathering, it will become better and better and safer. So we should not be irresponsible and launch in an autopilot a product that is not as good as human drivers. But if it's 1% better, I think a utilitarian approach would launch it, knowing that through more data gathering, it will get better over time. Lastly, I just want to quickly address some of the thoughts about the dangers of AI and what we should be thinking about the progress. We have already heard from the Secretary regarding security, privacy, bias as some of the issues, but I'm personally even more concerned about the job losses. Some economists think technical revolutions never lose more jobs than they create. But I argue this one is bigger, faster, and more complete in its replacement. Certain jobs will be enhanced by AI, doctors' jobs, lawyers' jobs, estate planning jobs, and so on. But most jobs are replaced outright. And that is something every government and every company and every human being should be concerned about. We should also be concerned about the giant companies getting too much power. We should also be concerned about the growing imbalance between larger, wealthier countries and smaller, poorer countries. We should be concerned the example of the Four Dragons and then China of going from a poorer country because of lower labor costs and growing out of it and becoming a developed country. That formula for success is no longer valid because robots will do the work even more cheaply than the lower cost labor. We should be concerned about the growing gap between the haves and have-nots. We should be concerned about the techno elites feeling like they can treat the other players as the so-called, in a certain book I read, the useless class. I think we need to reach out and invent the jobs and help people find not only jobs and pay, but also meaning. I believe creative jobs, I believe service jobs, I believe jobs with compassion are the things that we humans have to create and cannot hope or expect that AI will create the jobs for us. So finally, to conclude, I think UK has an amazing talent set. I think China has the need for such talent, and working together, I think UK and China can make the whole world a better place. Thank you.
Dr. Lee, thank you very much indeed for that. Dr. Lee's agreed to take some questions. I'm going to ask a few. We'll get to the audience in just a moment. Let me ask the first. You said data is the fuel for artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Is policy the obstacle?
Policy can be the obstacle, as well as issues like insurance liability, who pays when there are casualties, and also policy with respect to labor unions trying to protect certain jobs and trying to slow down the progress of technology. I think those things should be considered in the context of if a country chooses to slow down technical progress, there will be other countries that do not. So are you sure you want to slow down progress despite the temptations, because the rest of the world, China in particular, isn't going to slow down with you?
You raised a whole series of concerns at the conclusion of your presentation. How do you square that? How do you create policies that will avoid those risks, but at the same time not impede the technology revolution in AI?
Well, I think countries have to figure out how to tax the techno elite, because all this money is going to get made, and there needs to be unprecedented tax to subsidize the programs that are needed, whatever they are. I think there should be a new kind of venture capitalism that invests in companies that bring about jobs that may not make massive profit, but these are jobs that cannot be taken by AI. I think we should encourage industries that are in jobs like caretakers and teachers and doctors to figure out ways to grow their employment. So I think those things need to be done, and they need to be funded out of the people getting rich out of AI.
in your investment decisions, do you use AI? Do you use an algorithm to choose your investments?
We use AI to filter. We use AI to debug and find problems. But I'm happy to report AI is not ready to replace my job.
Delighted to hear it. Let's open it up now to the audience. Obviously, a huge amount of questions triggered a massive amount of interest. Please give us your name and your organization. We'll start with the lady just there. Name and organization and questions. Keep it tight. One question. That's it, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Lee, for your wonderful presentation. My name is Joyce Xie, and I work for IP Group, which is UK's largest venture capital investor, focused only on university research and university research spin-outs. Now, my question to Dr. Lee is that a lot of these companies that I work with in the UK, they've got great scientific base and they've got great technical capabilities. However, as you've mentioned in your presentation, that they don't have as big of a market as China or the US, which I think is a limiting factor for a lot of these kind of UK high-tech startups. So what would you recommend to them? Would you recommend that these companies actually set up JVs or subsidiaries in China to further realize their full potential? Thank you.
Okay, very good question about technocentric types of startups. I think there are a number of problems. I think scientists generally don't make very good CEOs. So I think there needs to be an alignment with a business CEO that partners or works with the technologists. The CTOs, the technologists can own a large share of the stock, but you really need a business person to move AI forward, especially for AI, which is selling to businesses, not to consumers. So the scientists generally are not sufficient. And going abroad is another big issue. While I'm very optimistic about China as a market, there appears to be a theoretical high level of synergy with the UK's concentrated technical depth. Going to China is hard. There are no American companies, or maybe Apple, but no American, other than Apple, basically no American companies, including my former employers, including my own effort, that have been successful in China. So I think having a Chinese partner, doing a JV, or licensing the technology, or selling the technology and not go after the market are some of the ways to proceed. I also think the venture capital investments in UK could be strengthened, and maybe the government can encourage some kind of UK-China fund, which is not only provides money, but also pathway for UK technology to hit the market and really be able to benefit from the size of the China market.
I see the Secretary of State nodding at that. Next question, please. Please. Microphone.
Great, thank you. Azim Azar, I'm an advisor at Accenture on AI. One question about these great Chinese companies is that they haven't yet expanded outside of their borders. We're starting to see a little bit of that with Didi and Malang and so on. Do you expect over the next 5 or 10 years us to be right across Europe and South America and North America using these AI-infused Chinese giants in our daily lives?
Yes and no. I think the no part is going to US English-speaking countries like the UK or Western Europe. I think that is very unlikely to be successful because I think the user base are more American-like. Therefore, American companies will continue to dominate. Also, I think China has, I didn't have a chance to go into this, Chinese mobile infrastructure and software application stack is a parallel universe to the Western one. So the skill set it takes to take a product to China is really hard. For example, working with Tencent and figuring out the WeChat ecosystem and customer acquisition is something that American companies will have a hard time, but the reverse is also true, figuring out how to do Facebook, Pinterest, and so on. So I don't anticipate there will be encroachment between those two large masses, that is US, Western Europe, English-speaking countries, and then China. But all the other countries, I think, will be the new battleground for the Chinese entrepreneurs, both the large ones and the smaller ones, because many of the other countries in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, South America, Africa, there will be similar demographics to China. There will be young users, And the American companies will view them as too low ARPU, too little money to be made, and it'll be perfect playground for Chinese companies that are willing to spend a lot of money and make it up later. So I think I anticipate growth of Chinese companies into those countries. But it's not a foregone conclusion whether they will win, but I think they will certainly take up some, get some successes.
So is the AI battle possibly, if it is a battle, if I can describe it that way, be fought along demographic lines, geographic lines, developed versus not developed countries? They're the sorts of lines that will see growth or failure to grow.
Well, I think the fate of underdeveloped countries and how they can control their destiny in AI is paramount to the development of mankind. To the extent that they become reliant only on American and Chinese companies, that means they won't have the revenue generator for the taxation and then the fixing of the lower income population and job displacement. So I think we should figure out a way that is more fair to all the countries as opposed to relying on the superpowers. But we're currently on a path for the superpowers to dominate. Yeah. As far as the battleground quote, it might not be totally appropriate because in my personal observation, the Chinese researchers and the European American researchers get along very well. They have a huge degree of mutual respect. They share results with each other. They use the same data set. That is actually going very well. I wouldn't call it a battleground at all. Where I think there is actually battle are the super powerful AI companies. The Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. They, because of their shareholder structure, want to keep a lot of secrets to themselves and then perhaps naturally grow their empire and indirectly stifle competition and innovation in smaller companies that are in UK and the companies we fund. So I think probably the bigger challenge is how to contain the super giants, not so much of US fighting China. Some competition will be there, but it's not as graphic as that.
Okay, next question, please. Sir, microphone's coming.
Thank you very much. Tim Clement-Jones, I'm the chair of the House of Lords Select Committee on AI, but I'm also deputy chair of the All-Party China Group. So I'm as enthusiastic as the Secretary of State is about collaboration on AI with China. But of course, and I must say, Dr. Li, thank you very much indeed for an absolutely fascinating and informative talk, particularly your closing remarks on the societal implications of AI. But I wanted to really follow up something that the Secretary of State said in terms of the issues that need to be resolved at international level when we are talking about collaboration between different countries and different companies on this. And of course, it's very much to be desired in order to balance the power of the US tech majors as well. The issue for me, having wrestled with the new data protection laws that have been going through the House of Lords in the last 3 months, is the whole question of data protection. And you mentioned yourself that there are rather different approaches to privacy in China. Do you think that those issues can be overcome in terms of international collaboration? Because clearly gaining public trust in use of people's data really is one of the prime considerations, as the Secretary of State mentioned himself. And that is very much in the forefront of our minds. And one very much hopes that in collaboration that can be resolved in terms of collaboration with China.
Yes, that is a great question and a question of great concern. Because of the cultural differences and people's own sense of different entitlement and willingness to trade off, I think it's hard to say either system of thinking is correct. But I would remind people here that while privacy is important and there is clearly a strong constituent wanting to see that such protection put in place, too much and perhaps unnecessary protection will impede the progress of technology. So there should be some middle ground that is acceptable. Taking a maybe less controversial example of cancer diagnosis. Certainly, I think everyone's entitled to own his or her own medical documents. It cannot be shared freely. But I like to put forth that sharing of anonymized medical data across individuals, across hospitals, across countries can only be good for mankind in discovering solutions that involve AI and other things. There are people who feel that you should remove all details from the medical records. I would advocate removing the name is very reasonable. There are people who would say, well, if you have my age, race, and gender and zip code, you can reverse engineer who I am. But I think that is maybe going too far into this issue to protect to that level of degree and impede our cure to cancer seems like putting the cart before the horse. So I'd like for some balanced consideration so that progress can be made while removing the most egregious offense and a violation of personal privacy.
Okay, next question, please. Over here, we'll go over to the corner there, please. Yeah, right in the corner there. Thanks.
Jonathan Cooley, I'm a partner in the technology team at Clifford Chance here in London. Bill Gates has suggested a tax on robots. Do you agree?
I agree in spirit, but I don't agree that's how you implement. I think what he means is as robots take away people's jobs, those who benefit financially from creating those robots should help pay for the jobs that are displaced. So I agree at that level. For example, I am a board member of Foxconn. We're going to have a lot of robots at Foxconn. I sure hope that when Apple factories are produced by robots rather than humans, that the US government will tax Apple rather than Foxconn, because all the money is made by Apple. So tax those who really make the money, not those who run the robots.
Time for just one more question. I'm afraid we're out of time, so you've been trying here. So yeah.
Alex McGilvery from CDC, which is the UK government's private sector investment arm, investing in Africa and South Asia. So you've said a bit about developing countries, but CDC is thinking about launching a VC fund targeted on those two regions. What would be your advice in terms of what to focus on and what opportunities to partner with Chinese VCs to kind of come up with more solutions to very large populations of people who are underserved in healthcare, education, energy, but there's no data?
So is the VC targeting profit or job creation?
Our mission is job creation.
Ah, wonderful. I love it. Okay. I was going to have a harder time answering the other question. I think in terms of job creation, it's always very difficult. There's this category called social entrepreneurship. And I think there are other names for similar activities. And actually UK, Japan, Taiwan are some of the countries and places that have done good work in the area. It's always very tricky because a VC seems to have only worked when there is a profit motive. It's capitalism that drives and aligns interests between the investor and the LPs and the entrepreneurs. So I think how to find that balance and that alignment of interest is tough. I think it's important to insist that there is profit generation, even though they can be relaxed greatly. Because I think without some degree of capitalistic motivation, there will not be scalability. If you have people who are mainly taking the money for philanthropy and giving it away to create jobs that aren't creating sustainable economic value, I think the whole effort is not sustainable. So as much as I believe the ultimate goal is job creation, I think we have to realize the metric that must be applied has to be a profit motive. I think we can relax it and say that show you can break even, show you can scale the jobs are kind of ways to incent them to move in the right direction. And also, I think a final advice is please create jobs that cannot be taken away by AI. Because otherwise, you create some jobs, people move into it, 3 years later, they're out there looking again. And the jobs, as I mentioned, that cannot be taken are obviously creative jobs, which are very difficult to create. But jobs of compassion, jobs involving human-to-human communications, and jobs with high level of dexterity. So a plumber's job is actually rather difficult, while an assembly line is very easy. So I think if we plot among those three dimensions, creativity, human compassion and connections, and dexterity, and go towards the high end in each of these, the jobs will be more sustainable.
Okay. Just before we go, Secretary of State, do you want to make a couple of comments?
Thank you very much indeed, and it was incredibly thoughtful and thought-provoking. There were just two responses and reactions that I wanted to make. The first is in terms of the question from Lord Clement Jones on data protection and privacy and the ethics of big data, which came up throughout everything that you said. And while, of course, our cultures are different and coming from different places, what struck me was that the response you gave in terms specifically of health was one that was very close to what I would say as the minister here. And we have, our new centre is the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation, because I strongly believe that the two are not contradictory but complementary. And I think internationally there is a growing consensus of the need for high standards of data protection and privacy alongside the ability to innovate on the data. And I hope that, I know that this synthesis is growing amongst many countries, and if the extent to which China can come to that table too, and that synthesis be with China too, I think would be a big advantage. The second thing I wanted to do was mention a response. I was very struck on your jobs argument. I agree very strongly about the need to develop the jobs that will exist in the future and can't be replaced. I've talked in the past about how we must make sure we support the disruption, but also support those who are disrupted and ensure that we build the jobs of the future. I'm potentially a bit more optimistic than you that I think that is eminently possible, and ultimately the technology will empower people, but there will be a big journey on the way and a lot of change. But especially here in the UK, when people say, are you in favor of this tech revolution because of its impact on jobs? My response is that the revolution is coming, whether we like it or not. The question is, will we get the new jobs that are available, not will we be able to hold on to the old ones? And if today's presentation has taught me anything at all, your extremely striking presentation about the advance of China in AI has demonstrated that that is absolutely true. The revolution is coming, and we need to be ready and at the forefront and working with you on it. Thank you very much indeed.
I'm afraid we're out of time. We clearly could go on for hours. There are so many issues here, and it is a revolution, one that's going to reshape business, industry, societies, economies, and the shape of the world. Dr. Lee, thank you very much for taking the time to see us. Please join me in thanking Dr. Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Please join us for a cup of coffee and a sandwich. Thanks very much.